Okay, Year 7, so this video is on or about the Battle of Hastings in 1066, something which we have studied already this year and something which you may need to know about for your end of year exam in a couple of weeks. So, to remind you of what happened, the Battle of Hastings is a battle on the 13th of October 1066 between Harold Godwinson and the Saxons, the English army, versus William of Normandy and his Norman army, with a few special guests who came to join him after the Pope had given him papal permission to go and invade England, but you don't really need to know about that. So, the context, what's happened in the build-up to this battle? Well, I've already talked about the succession crisis in a previous video. You know that William has basically come to England to take the crown away from Harold Godwinson, who was crowned in January 1066, the new King of England. William of Normandy has come to England to basically take that off Harold and become the King of England himself, as well as Duke of Normandy. Now, Harold, if you remember, has already fought in a battle against Harold Hardrada called the Battle of Stamford Bridge. That battle has just recently happened, just before the Battle of Hastings. So Harold's army, they won that, they beat Harold Hardrada and his Viking army, but Harold's army are tired. Yeah, they're tired and weary from not just the battle, where actually a lot of soldiers have died, so Harold's army is a bit weaker now than it was before the battle. Not only are they tired and weary and smaller from the battle, but also remember they've had a huge march down south from Stamford Bridge. Stamford Bridge is near York, okay, so it's not too far away from where we are. Okay, Hastings is on the southern coast of England, the south coast of England, even further south than London. Think, if you've ever driven to London or been driven to London, think how long it takes you to get there in a car. Okay, 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours, maybe even more if the traffic's bad. Takes a long time, and that's in a car. Okay, that's going 60, 70 miles an hour. This lot have been walking. The English army had to walk all the way from Stamford Bridge, which, as I say, is near York, in Yorkshire, all the way down to Hastings on the south coast of England. So they're tired from that as well. You've just had to fight a big, huge battle against the Vikings, who are an incredibly tough army, one of the best armies in Europe at the time, arguably the best, and beat them. So it's really taken a lot out of you. And now you've had to march all the way down south, 250 plus miles. Okay, so Harold's army are quite tired. Okay, whereas William's army are fresh. Now, when the two armies meet on the 13th of October, 1066, Harold places his Saxon army at the top of Senlac Hill. Okay, big hill. And they line up behind their shield wall. Remember that? The shield wall. So essentially the English, or the Saxon soldiers, the English soldiers, line up with their shields, their big shields, interlocked. Okay, really tightly interlocked. So trying to bash through that as they're pushing against these shields, locked together. It's really strong, really hard to get through that shield wall. So Harold has placed his army behind this shield wall for protection. Okay, he doesn't really want to go down and fight the Normans. He just wants to hold the Normans off for a day as more reinforcements arrive. Okay. Now the Normans are at the bottom of this hill, at the bottom of Senlac Hill, and they've lined up in 3 lines. William's lined his army up in 3 lines. Okay, the first line is archers, second line is the infantry, and the third line is the cavalry. So what do these terms mean? I'll keep that up so you can see it. What do these terms mean? Well, infantry is basically just soldiers on the ground, foot soldiers. Okay, cavalry are soldiers on horseback. Soldiers on horses, okay? Archers are obviously soldiers with bows and arrows. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. So you've got your archers with the bows and arrows, infantry, which are just your regular soldiers on foot, your foot soldiers, cavalry are your soldiers on horseback, okay? And the Normans are quite famous for their cavalry. They're really good at using horses in battle, okay, when the conditions suit them. So, again, despite having all of this, despite having, you know, a well-stocked army and a strong army with lots of different things going on, Harold just really had infantry and maybe a few archers, certainly didn't have any cavalry. So despite having all that, William and the Normans struggle at first in the battle. Okay, they can't get through that shield wall that I was talking about. They try. It's at the top of this quite steep hill, and they really try the hardest to get through. The infantry are trying to bash through, and they can't. Remember, the Saxons are busy slashing at them with swords and spears as they're doing that. And the horses, the cavalry, actually lose a lot of their speed as they go up the hill. On flat ground, horses, Norman cavalry, Norman horses, are really effective, but because Harold has placed his army at the top of the hill, by the time the horses get to the top of the hill, they're tired and they've lost a lot of their speed. So they're not working either. They're not being able to smash through this shield wall. So at first, the battle's going really well for Harold, and not at all well for William of Normandy. So William had to find a way of getting through this shield wall, because what he's tried so far hasn't worked. So what he did next was something called the feigned retreat. Now, what was the feigned retreat? A few of you, well, most of you hopefully will remember this, but I will remind you. The feigned retreat is where at one point in the battle, some of the Norman soldiers had run away, whether they were scared or they were. It's been written that many of them thought William had died, so they were scared and wanted to run back to their ships and hopefully sail back to Normandy. For whatever reason, a group of Normans decided to stop fighting and run back down the hill. Okay, and the Saxons, when they saw the Normans running down the hill, or a group of Saxons anyway, when they saw this group of Normans running down the hill, ran after them. They broke rank, broke out of the shield wall, and chased the Normans down to the bottom of the hill. And when they got to the bottom of the hill, the Norman soldiers, and particularly the Norman cavalry, then just cut them down. Okay, so William, upon seeing this, thought, oh, that's a good idea. We've managed to get some of the Saxon soldiers down from the shield wall, and hopefully there'll be some gaps opening up. If we keep doing that, if we keep bringing enough soldiers down from the hill, gaps will open up in the shield wall and we'll be able to get through. So he keeps doing this. He orders his soldiers to, at different intervals, run away and drag more of these Saxon soldiers down with them. And that's what happens. Okay, throughout the battle, a few more times, Norman soldiers turn and run away, and the Saxon soldiers run after them. Now, I said this in lesson, you might remember this, that remember many of the soldiers who are fighting at the Battle of Hastings for Harold and for the English, the Saxon soldiers, many of them are just farmers, okay? They're not trained soldiers. Most of the trained soldiers have actually died at Stamford Bridge. There are a few trained soldiers left, but many of them are farmers and they're not used to fighting, so they're not really thinking clearly in this battle. They're not thinking, oh, should we run after them? Should we follow our orders to stay here? Or should we go and kill them? Well, for some, this is probably the first time they've ever been in a battle and they get a bit carried away. So that's why they run after the Norman soldiers. That's one idea. Anyway, but for whatever reason, the Saxon soldiers run after the Normans, get cut down, and eventually some gaps open up in the shield wall, and then William and the Normans are able to break through. Okay? And eventually, during the battle, Harold Godwinson is killed. Now, famously, many chronicles from the time write that he was struck by an arrow in the eye, which killed him. It may well have killed him. He may have just been killed normally in the battle by some Norman soldiers, or it may have been that he got the arrow in the eye and it didn't kill him, but in the meanwhile he was going, oh, this hurts a lot. Maybe then he was dragged from his horse and cut to ribbons. We don't know for sure how he was killed, but the arrow in the eye image seems to have stayed with us because it's quite unique. But anyway, Harold is killed. Regardless of how he dies, he is killed in the battle, and at that point the Saxon soldiers go, well, the king's dead, we've got no reason to keep fighting, and the battle ends. William has won, and now he can begin to move towards London and claim the throne. Okay, I will talk more about William's, or the Norman conquest, William's attempts to control England in a future video, hopefully tomorrow. But that is basically what happens at the Battle of Hastings. You've got the Saxons at the top of Senlac Hill, behind this shield wall. The Normans eventually manage to drag some of the soldiers down from that shield wall using the feigned retreat, and eventually Harold is killed. William is the victor, and then he moves on to eventually become the next King of England. Remember, he's crowned on Christmas Day 1066, and as I say, I'll talk about William in my next video. There you go.